First John the elder writes about the importance of loving other people because Christ loves us so much. Christ laid down his life for us. Therefore, we're invited to lay down our lives for one another. Sometimes that means we do have to be brave and we do have to be prepared to die. And we are called to know that when we move from this life to life eternal, that is part of God's beautiful plan. So whenever and however that happens, we thank God when we land in our eternal home. The tricky part is that everyone wants to get to heaven, but most people don't want to get there too soon. Harvey Milk is a man who died in the prime of his life. He did indeed lay down his life so that other folks could know freedom. Partly laying down our lives is being prepared to die, but the other meaning of laying down our lives is something that, truth be told, all of us do every single day. Every day we live, we have just laid down 24 hours of our life. And that can build to good or harm, to closeness to Christ and one another, or maybe alienation. But we're reminded in 1 John that God's love is there to cover us, inspire us, and flow through us in ways that make a difference. Harvey Milk wasn't the first publicly elected official who was an out gay person. There are actually two women who were elected before he was. One was a woman in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I might butcher her name, Kathy Kozachenka, there you go. And that was in 1974. And also later that same year was Eileen Noble, who was elected as a state representative in Massachusetts. Harvey Milk is famous because he did indeed lay down his life. He did indeed prepare himself for the very real possibility of dying. He was quite active early on in working towards rights for folks who happened, by God's grace, to be homosexual. And he worked and he labored and he worked in the political sphere, not just on that single issue, but trying to reach out through government means of equal housing rights, of fair housing prices, all of that. And of course, he received a lot of death threats. And he once said that if a bullet goes through my brain, my prayer is that bullet crashes through every closet door in America. He called and recalled folks to dare to come out of the closet, reminding us all that if all the doctors and lawyers, and Dorothy Creswell, who's one of our snowbirds, she's not here now, but she's this sweet, petite, retired little kindergarten teacher who has a public television show in Amherst, Massachusetts. She said when she came out as lesbian, people were like, "What? You're lesbian? You know, you nice, normal kindergarten teacher who we already love. Too late. We'll have to change some stereotypes we've been working from." And Harvey Milk knew that. He knew if we would only know who our brothers and sisters were who were not straight, if you will, then we'd have to change our minds because we'd know, we already love these people. And so, inch by inch, folks have dared to tell their story. It is true that a number of people who are gay and lesbian have dared to come to our church because they know we're open and affirming. But I, who have been married to my husband for almost 39 years, we've had 5 kids, 12 grandchildren so far, I would not be in this church if this church was not open and affirming. And many of us feel that same way. Hello? Yes. Because Cindy said it for me. I always say I would never go to a church where I had to check my gay friends and family members at the door. Ever. Amen. And there are so many churches that say, oh, we welcome everybody. Really? Do you marry everybody? Maybe not. Maybe you're welcome if you keep quiet. Heaven forbid you would hold hands with the person you love in church. Unless you happen to be straight, then it's so sweet. I thank God that we can grow in faith as we grow in understanding for one another. Cindy's right that when the history of this church, when we first moved to becoming O&A, there was a little tension in that process. It was 7 years ago, and what did that mean? And becoming open and affirming really is all about accepting differences in orientation and gender expression. And yet in our church, one of the things we did to make it easier for people to understand is we broadened that call a bit. And we said there are many ways that people can be different. It's not all about sexual orientation. Some people are differently abled and require wheelchairs. Some people have ADHD and they have a lot of trouble paying attention and sitting still. Some people have this, that. There's so many ways we can be different. And so we extended that, and I'll tell you, that is not a bad thing. And because God's own truth is every situation that opens our hearts and minds to people who are different than us is how God grows us, shapes us, knocks those pesky rough edges. I get very attached to my rough edges. You know, I may have some prickly places, but those are certainly justified. But when we come together, it's not possible to do that because our lives knock up against other lives and other differences. And bump by bump, I've just got to get a little smoother, a little more worn by grace, a little more connected to how God moves through other people. At the top, where did it go? Which one? Oh, at the bottom. You see Kristen Beck, who is a transgendered woman who served honorably on, I think, 17 missions for the Navy SEALs. She served as a Navy SEAL all that time, 17 missions. This is the type of person who is currently being threatened with being banned from serving in our military. As she dared to come out as transgendered, which she didn't completely do until she retired, but for years before, she'd wear dresses at home. She knew herself to be a woman, but at work, she was a macho Navy SEAL. And inch by inch, as SEAL co-workers and friends got to know that, maybe they stopped by for a beer and she was in a dress. It turned out it was too late. They already respected her. They knew her work ethic. They knew her courage. They knew how she had day by day laid down her life in service to our country. There are so many ways we're tempted to say, I don't understand that. You're different from me that way. And God says, too bad. I love all my children. If you want to move closer to me, you must move closer to one another. Amen. The early church fathers had a saying that God is at the center of all things. And so if all humanity is looking towards God and moving towards God, what we inevitably find is that if we're moving towards God, we're getting closer to other people. The elder who wrote 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and we suspect it's the same person, we're not completely convinced, but one of the very earliest church fathers who lived from 60 AD to 130 AD and spoke with many of the original disciples and claimed to have learned a lot from the disciple Philip's daughters. He wrote about the elder who wrote these letters and said he got so old and infirm that to appear before people, his disciples had to carry him in. And they complained that every time he talked, he said the same thing. Again and again, he said, "Little children, you must love one another." And they thought, "Jiminy, don't you have anything else to tell us? Why do you say the same thing again and again?" And what he said was, because that was Jesus' commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. Remember when he asked Peter if he loved him, Jesus? And Peter kept saying, "Yes, yes, yes." And then what did Jesus say to Peter? "Feed my sheep." We are called to minister to one another, to take care of one another, if we in truth love one another. Love, as 1 John reminds us this morning, is not about the fancy words and expressions we say. It's about people like, I'm blanking out on her name, that wonderful woman who founded PFLAG. Somebody help me. Jean Manafort, I think. She didn't grow up wanting to be an activist. She was a middle-aged housewife, loved her family, things were going along just fine, until her son said, "Mom, I'm gay." And again, it was too late, darn it, she already loved that kid. And so she figured out how to stand beside him as he walked, sometimes in dangerous places. She started PFLAG, and there she is with her signs, inviting parents of gays to unite in support of their children. There's a picture of Devin Glad. That was so exciting. It wasn't the first same-sex marriage I performed, but it was the first one in this church. And they got the first certificate after equal marriage rights were finally achieved in Florida. I was so bummed when I moved from Maine. Day that was. They were first in line, got their marriage license. We had that happy day. I came from Maine, where we had worked for years for equal marriage rights, where the very first time there was a campaign for equal marriage rights, the parsonage that I lived in was right next to the church. And I put a "Yes on One" sign on the parsonage lawn. And some people were not very happy with me for putting a political sign on the lawn. And I said, that's my personal lawn while I'm living here. And some people were a little crabby, but they got over it. And it almost got through, got really close. The second time we had a campaign, not only did people in that church want me to have a sign on my yard, they said, we need several of these on the church lawn too. And we had our rainbow fish hanging outside in the tree near the front door. After I left, the person who took over from me went to a council meeting, and someone wanted to donate a giant rainbow flag, and so they talked about it. And she was thinking in the back of her head, how long is this going to take? And immediately everybody said, "Good idea. When will we put it up?" Someone else said, "I'll do it tomorrow." Okay. God does move us inch by inch to walk beside beside one another in ways that make a difference. And that's something to celebrate. Thank God.
Amen.